Hello, everybody. My name is Jacek Bartosiak. Welcome to Strategy and Future. And today, my guest is a prominent Turkish security expert, Arda Mevlütoğlu, with whom we already talked about the evolution of the battlefield and the Turkish experience. But today, we are recording our conversation on the last day of May 2021, a few days after the visit. Broadly commented visit of the Polish delegation to Turkey when Poland decided to buy the Turkish UAV systems. Hello, Arda. How are you?
Hello. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. Thank you very much.
It's a beautiful timing, so to speak, to discuss to you. And I'll just get straight away, take a shot straight, to the most important topic. What is the perception in Turkey about the importance of this acquisition and the Polish visit to your country?
The visit and the contract was met with great excitement by the Turkish community, Turkish people, because of a variety of reasons. First of all, as you might very well know, the drone industry and especially the Bayraktar drones have become a symbol of national pride and also have become a symbol of developments in defense and aerospace technology in Turkey. So any new success in defense sector and drones in particular are met with great enthusiasm, great joy by the Turkish public because they represent further achievements in the areas of technology industry in Turkey. And Turkey has recently achieved significant export sales in the area of drones, such as Bayraktar exports to Ukraine, Qatar, Azerbaijan, Anka drone to Tunisia. So the contract to Poland and the size of it, the numbers involved are huge. So it's a huge success. A very important point of this export is that Poland is a member of both NATO and European Union. Therefore, the sale of such a sophisticated, such an advanced product to a NATO and European Union member is also perceived as a major achievement for Turkish defense industry, a testimony to the development of the industry, which has for the past 20 years achieved significant advancements or developments. So and also some scholars in Turkey mentioned the historic roots between the two countries. For example, when Turkey was establishing its aviation industry shortly after the foundation of Republic in 1930s, and also during 1940s, a lot of Polish scientists and engineers came to Turkey, and they helped Turkey to establish its aviation industry as well as other industries, and also those people contributed to the establishment of Turkey's universities, scientific institutions. And with the help of Polish scientists and engineers, Turkey managed to manufacture some aircraft and even export them. And also Turkey purchased some Polish aircraft in 1930s to use in its air force. All in all, this new chapter seems to reinforce or seems to rebuild the historic relationship between the two countries, which have some similar requirements, some similar threat perceptions, some similar geopolitical ambitions or priorities, and also it may also act as a facilitator to develop defense industry relationship between the two countries. These are all the main topics that have been discussed in Turkish public during these days.
Okay, before we move to the geopolitical considerations and the identity of interest or lack of it, let's focus for a while on the parameters of the UAV system that we purchased. Of course, you can read all those details in many media, but what would you highlight, or what sort of capabilities? I'll tell it to the public. What is the system for, basically? How does that operate, and what is it suited for?
Bayraktar TB2 drone was developed for primarily for Turkish land forces as a tactical UAV. By tactical UAV, we mean that those UAVs, those drones are used for the intelligence and surveillance requirements of army units in the field with a defined area of responsibility. But the resultant aircraft after the development phase surpassed the requirements. Its endurance, its payload carrying capacity, and its service ceiling, the altitude in which the drone operates, those all surpassed, exceeded all the expectations and requirements. And it has become an advanced drone that is able to carry even guided munitions. And starting from 2015 and 16, Bayraktar drones have begun being weaponized. They have been equipped with precision-guided bombs. Again, those are developed by Turkish industry, and those drones have begun being used in precision strike operations, especially in counter-terrorist operations. So Bayraktar drone is a very interesting design because in terms of cost and in terms of performance, it seems to have achieved a very delicate balance. If you compare it with its equivalents in the market, such as Israeli drones or other European or even maybe American drones,
let's compare on specifically with the American drones for the
yes.
Polish public to understand. Okay.
For example, in terms of competition, there is not vis-a-vis equivalent in the US market, but you can compare it to the Predator drone, which is significantly more expensive and heavier, or Israeli-made Hermes or Heron drones, again, which are very, very expensive, even maybe twice as expensive as compared to Bayraktar. So compared to all these drones, Bayraktar is significantly cheaper. And also it is able to carry 2 or 4 guided bombs, which are smaller in size than the American ones. But the fact that you can acquire and operate much larger numbers of Bayraktar drones at the same time, it creates an advantage in itself. As we have seen in Turkish operations in Syria, especially in Idlib in 2020, in March, Turkish army operated large numbers of Bayraktar drones in a very small area, fulfilling surveillance, reconnaissance, and also precision strike missions at once. And at a very fraction of a cost compared to American or Israeli drones. That cost versus performance factor is Bayraktar's main advantage. And also Azerbaijan has also used that advantage very effectively in Nagorno-Karabakh war late last year, deploying large numbers of Bayraktar drones, using them in intelligence missions, and at the same time target acquisition, which means finding targets in the field. And when those drones found the targets, they immediately strike those targets with their guided bombs or relay the target information to artillery units, which again is a very major achievement, because it's when you see you are able to shoot almost instantly, and that creates a huge devastating effect on the adversary. So all in all, Bayraktar
sorry, Arda,
Bayraktar,
what do you mean instantly? So that
there is a term called sensor-to-shooter cycle. It means that when you see a target through your sensors, you acquire the coordinates, the location information of the target, and you transmit that target information to air force or to artillery units for them to strike the target. But in modern battlefield, especially against mobile targets such as armored vehicles, such as trucks or troop movements, you need to transmit that data as fast as possible to the artillery units or air force units, because you don't want to lose very precious seconds or minutes for them to get the data evaluated and start firing to those targets. But armed UAVs enable that sensor-to-shooter cycle to decrease very significantly. First, they are able to strike those targets, which we call as time-critical targets, themselves. If they don't have guided weapons on board, then they transmit that target information in seconds, in light speed, to artillery units, and those artillery units they adjust their firing positions accordingly within a matter of seconds, if not minutes. That sensor-to-shooter cycle is shortened by the use of UAVs. That's why I use the term immediately. When you see a target, you can hit them almost instantly or immediately with the help of UAVs.
Mm-hmm. And what is the at Idlib or in Libya, when the system was also used on Gorski Karabakh, what was the scheme of operations? I mean, what was the range, but not the range in terms of the parameter, but you need to have this in this OODA loop, right? Observation, orientation, decision maker, action. You need to feel the system, right? So what is
yes.
the range? What is the sort of a circle of operations so that it's all effective and efficient and fast and so on?
The UAVs in those conflicts were used in three main types of missions. The first one is traditional intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance type missions. Some of and ISR, as we call it in literature, those ISR missions they have two subdivisions. The first one is pre-planned ISR missions. You establish a mission plan, you prepare a mission plan, and you fly your drone on a predetermined area of responsibility or area of interest to fly and to seek for targets or targets of interest, or to look for some enemy encampments or movements, etc. And the second subdivision is just fly over a road and to find targets of opportunity. When you suspect there's something at that region, you fly a drone to find out if there indeed is a target there, and the drone searches for something, the location or the moment of which is unknown before. So that's the first type of missions, traditional intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance missions. The second type of missions are precision strike by drones. So those drones, whether or not they are flying for ISR missions, they are used to strike targets with the guided weapons that they carry. For example, they are used to strike some air defense systems or some armored units or artillery units with the weapons they carry. And the third type is target acquisition and fire coordination missions. So the drones, by the laser target designator which is installed in the electronic cameras, electro-optic cameras. They locate the enemy targets, such as especially air defense systems, radars, armored units, or artillery units. They determine the coordinates of the targets, and they transmit that target data to artillery units, missile units, or air force units. So for those three main categories, the UAVs were used in coordination with friendly electronic warfare assets, artillery units, and Air Force units. So that coordination was in fact the key to Turkish success in Libya and Syria, and also in Azerbaijan case as well. The drones were not used as a standalone or in isolated manner. They were deployed with coordination, in coordination with electronic warfare systems, in electronic intelligence modes, and also in jamming electronic attack modes, with Air Force, such as fighter jets or attack helicopters, and also artillery units, such as self-propelled howitzers or artillery rockets. So the drones were just like the tip of the spear of a much larger warfighting mechanism. And that effective coordination was possible through the use of high-speed communications network and command and control backbone.
Mm-hmm. I understand, but what is the range of operation? I mean, what is the theater of operation when you could really?
It was mostly tactical level. Bayraktar TB2 drone was used in mostly battalion to brigade size operations.
Okay, fair enough.
But it doesn't meet much larger scales.
Yeah, as you know, Poland is not. I mean, at least as we hope, is not supposed to face, insurgency or terrorist things or asymmetrical battlefield. But we are facing symmetrical battlefields. I mean, I don't need to explain why. Yes, and you sort of also faced it at Idlib, even Gorno-Karabakh.
Yes.
So how does this system fare against the Russian-made assets and Panzer and St-300? Was it employed? Because there are many legends about it. Could you tell us a little bit more?
I'm sure you also followed all these social media footages, YouTube videos that Bayraktars and Ankas destroy a large number of Russian-made air defense systems, especially the Panzer low-level air defense systems. So yes, there is in fact a remarkable success against Russian-made air defense systems, but that was made possible because of a number of factors. First and foremost, as I tried to explain, the drones were used in coordination with electronic warfare very efficiently. That was the first of these factors.
Arda, electronic warfare and deployed on ground or by the manned platforms?
Mm-hmm. Mostly on ground, but we can also claim that airborne electronic warfare assets as well, because Turkey already possesses such capabilities.
Okay. But in terms
mostly ground-based electronic warfare assets.
But ground-based meaning the special operation forces operating in the vicinity of the system, or it was some sort of a permanent?
That would definitely be the case, but Turkey has developed some vehicle-based larger electronic warfare systems. One of the most well-known system is Coral, developed by Aselsan. It's a complex platform consisting of two elements. One is electronic intelligence gathering vehicle, and the other one is electronic attack vehicle. And Turkey also has similar vehicle-mounted electronic attack systems. They might be compared to the Russian ones. Russia also possesses such, truck-mounted large electronic warfare systems capable of conducting electronic attack from long ranges. Turkey used such systems very effectively in Syria.
Okay, but does it, just for the public to understand properly, it's critically important. Did you disable were you capable of disabling the Russian assets by jamming them or by creating the protection barrier around your systems that they could operate without a signature or without being detected? How does that work?
The specifics and details are not very well made to the public, but according to open source information, Turkish electronic warfare systems, ground-based, vehicle-based electronic warfare systems are capable of doing the two things you mentioned. Jamming the signals and jamming the operating modes of Russian air warfare, air defense systems, and also by creating such as virtual barriers for drones to operate safely. So they are capable of doing all these different types of operations, and that enables drones to operate safely.
Okay, so we have mentioned the proper electromagnetic warfare capabilities. What other factors ensure the success of you?
Yes, another one is the disadvantage or deficiency on behalf of the opponent side or the enemies. One is the proper training and readiness of the personnel, and the other one is a systemic or hardware deficiencies. Almost all of these air defense systems that Turkish destroyed, such as Pantsir, SA-6 or SA-9s, they were designed to detect and intercept low-flying but high-speed targets, such as combat aircraft or cruise missiles or helicopters. But Bayraktar is relatively a very small body. It's a very small platform compared to an F-16 fighter or an Apache attack helicopter. It is small in size and it flies in very slow speeds compared to all these targets. So it falls under the threshold of these radars to detect targets. Bayraktar can easily conceal itself with the surrounding environment to not to be detected by these radars, because it flies at low altitudes. It flies relatively slow, and it's a small body. And to successfully distinguish Bayraktar from the surrounding environment requires high processing power, high electromagnetic power for a radar or an advanced radar. But Syrian or Armenian or Libyan air defense systems, their radars were not designed to detect such an aircraft, such an air platform, and that was the advantage for Bayraktar TB2.
Mm. Did they operate as well under the protection umbrella of the your manned aerial platforms that were scanning the area?
In case of Idlib, yes, because Idlib is very close to Turkish border, and Turkish Air Force used that proximity advantage very successfully. Turkish fighters, without the need to enter Syrian airspace, successfully provided electronic warfare and precision strike missions from Turkish airspace, protecting Bayraktar drones and also ground units on the field as well.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So the manned platforms could operate within your country, while the unmanned systems operated at the forefront, so to speak.
Exactly.
With some special operation forces and ground units and selective operations on ground to make sure that the correlation of fire.
In some cases, there were at least one dozen of Bayraktar and Anka drones flying simultaneously over Idlib, which is a very, very small confined area.
How many? 1 dozen?
At least 12 or 15 drones at the same time flying simultaneously.
Fair enough. No, fair enough. Okay, so I think I have satisfied my curiosity in that respect. But I would be very, very much interested in hearing from you. what is the Turkish understanding why Warsaw, why Poland has decided to purchase those systems from you? If you just could elaborate on that a bit, Arda.
In Turkish circles, in Turkish community, international relations and defense security communities, there is an ongoing discussion or assessment that Poland has been a very close ally of United States and a very important member of NATO. But especially after the events in 2014 in Ukraine, Poland might be looking to improve its national capabilities or independent capabilities to be able not to depend on United States or European Union in the event of a crisis or a security threat. Because especially during the latest crisis in March, April this year, in which in eastern Ukraine there was this high tension, Russian buildup. Several European countries, especially the major ones, were reluctant to actively support Ukraine. At least this is the Turkish perception for that period. Therefore, there are some comments which I also agree to a degree. There are some comments that Poland might be looking to increase its indigenous capabilities. By indigenous, I don't necessarily mean indigenous defense industry products, but increase of capabilities that are not bound by political conditions or some political strings attached. As we very well know that, and Turkey also has suffered from this very much for many decades, many European countries or United States or maybe other countries as well, when they export sophisticated major defense equipment such as combat aircraft or missiles or this and that, they also impose sometimes very strict political conditions for the deployment and for the modernization or use of those systems. And those conditions do not always necessarily fall within the national priorities or national requirements. I want to give an example, a very well-known example for Turkey, which is the Cyprus issue. In 1964, Turkey decided to intervene militarily to Cyprus because Turkey is a guarantor state, and United States just withhold Turkey from doing a military operation because all the military platforms Turkey has were supplied by United States, and they were bound by an agreement that Turkey was not to use those weapons or aircraft without the permission of United States. That was a critical breaking point or critical milestone for Turkish public to see that Turkey's priorities or Turkey's national security requirements not always necessarily are aligned with those of United States or other allies. So therefore, in order to pursue national priorities, national security requirements, Turkey needs to build up a national and indigenous capability, and defense industry is the key for that build-up. So it was a long example. Sorry for that, but
that was a very good one, and I'd like to add to the public a broader explanation because it's critically important to understand. In the 60s, President Johnson sent a letter to the Turkish Prime Minister, as far as I remember, admonishing the Prime Minister not to take any action within the Turkish national interest on Cyprus, and threatening with two retaliations. First of all, cutting short supply for the American-made systems, military systems, and also not protecting Turkey in case of the Soviet invasion.
Exactly.
And I know from my discussions with the Turks that it pounded. I mean the Turkish establishment. I mean security establishment, and you remember this forever, so to speak, right?
Yes, it's a scar in Turkish public's collective memory. And in 1974, when Turkey actually intervened to Cyprus, the following year, in 1975, the United States imposed an arms embargo, which lasted until 1978. And that period is generally accepted as the starting point of Turkey's defense industry establishment. And we are again today facing another kind of embargo and sanctions because of Turkey's purchase of S-400, which is completely a different story, by the way. So, in summary, Turkish public and also Turkey's decision makers have become aware that in order to pursue geopolitical interests, in order to establish national security, you need to have indigenous capabilities. Those indigenous capabilities can be products of your indigenous defense industry or products and capabilities that are not bound by political conditions or some other restrictions. Therefore, some observers, some scholars are assessing in Turkey that Poland might also be following that course also. Then Bayraktar might be a symbol of that new direction. At least this is my assessment for this export success.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I agree with your assessment. Let me propose the following now. I will try to sketch out how we perceive the Turkish grand strategy these days from Poland. So how the Poles see the Turkish grand strategy. And if I may ask you for a revenge, and you will try to sketch out the Polish grand strategy evolving, how you see it from Ankara and Istanbul and so on. Okay. We will see whether it corresponds somehow and whether the perceptions are accurate. And of course, feel free to comment, even interrupt me if you do not agree with what I'm saying. Based on my discussions and readings with Turkish, institutions and experts and reading other stuff and my own intuition, it seems that Ankara, especially over the last 10 years, sort of realized that the US power is ebbing. That the U.S. power is in decline. Maybe it's too big a word, but it's not as powerful as it has been. And because Turkey is in between the great continental power of Russia or Soviet Union and the sea powers of Great Britain, United States, it tended to balance the Russian threat by engaging with the United States or Great Britain, especially United States after the Second World War. But if the US power is ebbing, security challenges rise. And the Americans cannot service the security threats and challenges that Ankara is facing. And this is why there is sort of this decoupling. And it doesn't have anything to do with undermining NATO. It just is sort of using collective alliance of NATO as a shield in terms of the major war. But the sword has to be forged by Turkey itself by reacting under the threshold of Article 5 to different contingencies in the neighborhood, without going into detail whether they are, well reasoned or not. It's not in Polish, in a Pole's perspective to evaluate, whether all causes are good or bad. You know it better than myself. But this, in terms of structure. You feel that the US is ebbing, you need to survive, and you need to make sure that your interests are serviced. And then that's why you decided to fight and negotiate at the same time. That's why you fight the Russians and negotiate them at the same time. You talk to them and kill them and kill their assets at the same time. So there is this perennial, the eternal dynamic situation all around Turkey that you sort of had to adjust to. So this is a gist of my understanding, and that's why you have your own UAVs. That's why you employ forces, and basically that's why there are voices in NATO that sort of claim that you undermine NATO because you do not follow strictly the United States sort of a instructions. Would you add anything or comment or disagree with me on that?
I definitely agree, and this is also this has also been voiced very loudly by many Turkey's prominent scholars and even government officials as well, because of United States not withdrawing but failure to establish a good posture against security threats, especially in this region, in this part of the world. Turkey felt left alone by United States and also other prominent NATO allies. Look at all these developments that has taken place since 2008, for example. The Caucasian War with Georgia, the Ukraine thing, the developments in Black Sea region, the Arab Spring, Libya and Syria wars, civil wars. In all these security threats, Turkey felt isolated, left alone. Turkey felt alone, and it's sort of, and especially first one, last but not least, the developments after 2014-15, the disagreement with United States over PYD case. It's a very critical issue for Turkish public, Turkish policymakers. Because of all these factors, Turkish public especially went through a new understanding. Turkey is facing a lot of security threats, a lot of challenges, and in order to meet those challenges, Turkey should rely on itself, but no one else. And that was the start of a new period, which we are seeing effects in today's developments.
Before I press you on also assessing the Warsaw's perspective, one more question, which is critically important also for Poles. I understand that the Turks had no doubts as to what to do in terms of their own capability and resolve to really try to deliver the outcome. Because there are, smaller countries and bigger countries. Sometimes small countries realize that, there is no chance that we can achieve this outcome. So forget it. Let's not waste our resources. Let's partner with someone stronger and let's listen to what he or she is going to tell us. Okay. I understand that there was not even a debate in Turkey because Turks know that, they are the power and they need to deliver. Do you know what I mean, Arda? How
exactly?
This is the feeling that you have, yes?
Exactly, and it's a consensus issue. It's agreed by the vast majority of the public. There is no doubt about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, what would you say about Poland and how do Turks see Poland now and its geopolitical position, and how, in your own perspective, we should maneuver?
Poland seems to be located in a difficult region. At one side, there is this Russia, a major power, a superpower, and at one side, there is Europe, continental Europe, or West, as we may call it. So Poland seems to be situated in between those two different powerhouses. And Poland will always face significant security challenges in this period or many decades later. Those security threats might change in form and change in quantity maybe, or in nature, but it will not be easy for Poland as well as Turkey. It will not be easy for Turkey also. In one way, from one perspective, those two countries resemble each other. In the north, Poland, and in the south, Turkey, they are both like bridges between east and west. And Poland will always be facing very difficult choices between west and east, or between this and that. There will be always be like different choices for Poland. But in order to successfully establish security in its national integrity, in its national sovereignty, Poland will always be finding, Poland will always be facing the how can I say, requirement to establish indigenous capabilities. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for Poland to refrain from, being dependent to one side. You know what I mean? It always seems very easy to depend on one side, and Turkey also tried to do that in the past. It's always easy to depend on this organization or that alliance to establish national security, but it is not, in reality, it's not that way. So from Ankara, especially from friends and colleagues that follow developments in Baltic region in Poland, these countries seem to be facing with this dilemma on one side, being more dependent to a much larger power, or establishing some capabilities or some not politically bounded alliances, or not restricting alliances. So to summarize, Poland seems to, I'm not trying to, I don't want to use that word, but awakening, but it's not a very good choice for a word. But Poland is sort of undergoing the very same experience that Turkey has recently undergone, which is, again, I will repeat this, establishing a capability that is not restricting Poland politically.
Okay, and before we end our conversation, and it could last forever, it's getting very interesting, and maybe that will be a good encouragement to have another episode soon.
Definitely, definitely.
What hurdles should we expect on that path, Arda, before we conclude?
So, if my assessment is correct, and if Poland is, creating a larger area for itself, then that new direction, that new decision might upset Poland's existing alliances and relations to a certain degree. Which alliances or which relationships? First and foremost, Polish-American cooperation or partnership, and also Poland's relations with European Union. To what extent and how that upset might take place will depend on how further Poland goes, or how further those powers will exert pressure, I think. And also that chain reaction also depends on, I think, indirectly at least, Turkey's relations with United States and European Union also. Because if Poland decides to, further deepen its relations with Turkey, is there a risk for this to affect Poland's relations for United States? It's complicated, I know, but if United States, puts Turkey out of the equation, and if Poland does more business with Turkey, then does this affect Poland's relations with the United States? That's a question that we need to, I think, follow up with. But even if that takes place or not, I think, and I believe Washington and Brussels are keeping very close eye on the outcome of this new direction. There might be consequences, but in the short term, at least, I don't think very severe or very difficult periods to happen.
Although I promise that this was the last question, I need to ask you the
No
question
problem.
that I right now recall that I always wanted to ask you. Okay, actually, you were fighting Russians in Syria in a way, and in Libya in a way by proxy, but still, and also in the north. What were your considerations where you were about to face the nuclear power, so to speak, at the battlefield? So, without having the nuclear weapons on your own in this new generation warfare, just if you just could say briefly, what were the Turkish considerations before engaging?
Before touching on that, we should remember that Turkey is neighbor to 2.5 nuclear powers. 2.5. Why? One is, of course, Russian Federation, a nuclear superpower. The other one is Israel, and which does not officially accept it's a nuclear power, but we all know that Israel is also a nuclear power. And the half is Iran, which is about to be a nuclear power or not. And all of these countries have very long-range missiles and very large missiles that covers the entire Turkish geography. And Turkey has been facing this threat, so to speak, for many decades now. Until very recently, Turkey relied on the Article 5 umbrella of Article 5 protection of NATO to meet with Russian aggression or possible Russian threats or attacks. But very lately, Turkey has initiated steps to develop indigenous capabilities to establish, missile defenses or especially missile and air and missile defenses to establish national defense against such threats. In terms of developing a nuclear capability, Turkey does not officially pursue such direction, and I don't personally expect it to happen anytime soon. But establishing a credible deterrent force without the use of nuclear capabilities is also possible, especially through conventional means such as electronic and cyber capabilities, precision strike capabilities, and that is the direction Turkey is going. But in terms of regional competition with Russia, that competition seems to be seems to have some limits, limits of which both sides do not want to cross any further. Russian Federation also, and that limit is defined by the geographical or geopolitical other factors. The two countries are neighbors, and they also have some mutual interests in other places, and Turkey is a NATO member, and this and that. So that competition has its own predetermined limits. It seems so.
Okay, thank you for this answer. That also addresses a few concerns that we might have in trying to navigate in those new uncharted, in a way, uncharted waters.
Exactly.
So I hope that I will, you will allow to you agree to having another episode conversation.
Definitely, my pleasure.
But for the time being, thank you very much, Arda.
Thank you for your time also.
My guest at Strategy and Future was Arda Mevlütoğlu, a Turkish security issues expert. Thank you very much. My name is Jacek Bartosiak. Stay with us at Strategy and Future.